It's been a long time since I've been at this table. But I was looking at Founding Fathers, and maybe do another mandatory readjust. Well, while I put them away, let's take a look at the components. The board, simple, functional. I find it attractive, but I don't think there's anything really negative to say about it. It seems to work pretty well for what it does, and everything's fairly delineated. There's a little bit of weirdness in terms of some of the chairs where the cards are going to be. The cards end up lined up in different directions and everything. The box, I guess, is good enough as long as you're not going to drop it a long distance behind a bookshelf and crush it. These wooden squares, I guess they make things more obvious, but honestly some of the color choices, at least in my lighting, the blue and the gray ended up kind of blurring together. I don't have great lighting in here, and counters certainly would work just as well if they were as large as the blocks are. I guess the blocks, I don't know, make someone happy who likes big wooden pieces in their game. To me, my assumption is that something like that's going to cost more money, and I don't see much value to it compared to your normal chits. Speaking of which, the chits look good and functional, nice thick guys. Might need to be clipped still, sorry about that. The articles for the actual Constitution, the symbols on them are fine. I'm going to have trouble distinguishing them just because of my inability to read symbolic things easily. The actual text on them, though, it's written to look like the constitutional text. It's hard to decipher. That may be a positive, it may be a negative. It doesn't really affect play. But it is kind of nice to be able to read the differences and see them nicely, and it's not really available. These guys I hardly used. They give you a nice breakdown on how many different delegates there are from each state. And then on the back, they give you your sort of play aid, sequence of play information, and how to resolve the different things. That's a really nice little feature. I like when a game gives you most of what you need to each player in a very small piece. So you certainly can't be unhappy with that. I can't complain about little wooden discs, can I? Yeah, I'm sure I could. No, there's no problem with them. Again, though, the colors, they look fine under good lighting, but when I have them on the board, it's a little hard to distinguish. The cards, I think, are fantastic. Really nice light, easy to shuffle, but it's obvious they suffer damage, which may be the case with light, easy to shuffle thin cards. And this, I don't know if it was the prior player or if more likely the damage that I did on the drop or the shipping. See, they were packed. This was kind of a gripe about this. They weren't packed well, like in a bag or anything. The rule book's a glossy book, not the best in the world in terms of. I don't like these kind of procedural rule books, but with something this simple, it's not too bad. You saw I managed to make a mistake anyway. That's just my nature. What about the play, though? So, the first thing, which matters not at all to most people who are probably going to be looking at this, is sort of the historical feel of it, etc. And in a lot of ways, I can start to justify what's happening on the board with the historical. It makes sense that the people who lost the recent fight on the assembly floor would maybe be able to cut a deal and get something through the back. But honestly, I thought almost everything actually went through at least a voting process, and that each of these elements were fairly heavily scrutinized and compromised on. So the compromise mechanism for the game, this is probably my biggest disagreement with it, is that it Eurofies this whole negotiation and compromise that to me should be the heart of the game. The heart of the game really should be, and that's not the game which is designed, so people complain, oh, you're not, well, such as. To me, the heart of this issue is showing that negotiation and showing the reasons for it. And what we're seeing instead is something that I don't know mattered to anyone or many people who were there, which is, how will I go down in posterity and it doesn't matter what side I stand for or what issues I stand for. I'm just here to get some kind of coalition and to get people to speak well and this, that, and the other. And that rings really false. What it comes down to is that's the answer to make this a game that fits the Euro mold well. But it doesn't really manage to capture the kind of historical feel that I'd want in a game like this. I don't feel like I'm a real participant. I don't feel like James Madison's main interest. Yeah, I'm sure that focus, that blew the focus. I'm not sure that Madison's primary interest or Hamilton's primary interest was the view that posterity had on them and what coalitions they put together, regardless of what they ended up meaning. Now you could perhaps say, well, you're not really them. Well, what are you then? You know, this you're a player of a Euro. That's all. So yeah, that really does disturb me about it. However, I think the gameplay itself is really, really decent. And this may be like Wallenstein, one of those games where I kind of can put aside a little bit of that, gee, I really wanted something else, just because I think there's a lot of fun to this. In particular, the decision-making on whether or not you want to fall into the committee. Sometimes it may be better to lose an issue specifically because you get an extra guy into committee and that frees up some guys who've got stuck there. For the most part, I don't see the committee as a viable strategy. I don't think it's going to give you much. It's a consolation prize at the best. And then on the other side is the debates and all the, incentives for, do you want to jump out or early in the debates so that you don't look like you have as many points, but then when it comes to it on that last turn when people are trying to grab a debate point, you're just insurmountable in that one debate or whatever. On the other hand, you can be playing to try to win the votes, to try to win the issue, to be on the winning side of the issue regardless of what matters. You're playing your cards and drawing cards and discarding perhaps. I never did it, but I can see where it would be valuable if you've got a state you could swing that's important to you, to discard some of your cards to grab a couple where you know they're from that state so that next time you can turn it. I think there's a lot here that I just can't touch on in one playing, in terms of getting an understanding for this. But I think, this is the kind of game that as a game can be a lot of fun to play. Still, for me, the historical is almost a deal breaker. The fact that it doesn't give that flavor. I mean, when it comes down to it, this was, possibly it would not have even happened had people played the kind of politics that people play today. We would have had, a coalition of a couple of states here and a couple of states there. And, it almost feels like we're not in one nation today because of the amount of divisiveness. And in large extents, regional divisiveness, where one state is just purely on one side and one is on the other, and you can't go back. Anyway, if you were, I think something highlighting that kind of the negotiation side of it, and trying to get as much of your particular little goals, which might be hidden or whatever, is more in line with showing the historical motivations at that time. But maybe that wouldn't be as interesting a game. Maybe that game's already been created sort of with Credo. Compared to Credo, which is the only thing I can really compare this to in terms of trying to get agendas across in this kind of way. This is not as silly, but it's very clearly a better game. One of the things you might look at with a game like this is, well, you know, how much are there fixed strategies? Are there things that are just going to be standing there all the time? And if you're talking about fixed strategies of, you know, whether or not to go for debates or votes or whatever, I don't think it's possible. And here's why. Because other players' actions are going to shift your options a great deal. And also, now, the committee room is not a strategy as far as I'm concerned, but when I was first looking at it, I thought after that first turn, when everybody went for just passing what they wanted to pass, to get points from passing something, I thought, wait a minute, maybe I want to be on the losing side to get to the committee room. I think that's very rarely the case. That's the case when you've got too much invested in the losing side already and you want to just boost your way over, perhaps. In general, you want to be on the winning side, but you also do want the winning side to be the side you want it to be. In the sense of, if you've got debate tokens built up or whatever, you definitely do want some control over them. And in terms of, do you jump on the debates early? Do you jump on trying to get issues passed just to get points, no matter what the issues are, if you can make your hand work to get them through? Those kind of things, I think, are very situational, and with the way the deck kind of mixes everything up, and yeah, you have some control. I can grab a delegate who's in favor of my side, from the correct state. But as the states fill up, as the votes are beginning to be placed, it gets harder and harder to find just a quick one that you can throw down and get your vote passed. Also, if you can play a bunch of cards at once on the winning side, on one state, that's a cool thing, because you get 1 point per state, or per voter that you put in there. Of course, if they end up on the losing side, that's a bunch of cards you just threw. But it's just one play, and plays are, I think, the more important thing. The cards themselves, while some of them have nice events on them that you may want to hold, for the most part, the cards themselves are just a free commodity. At the very beginning of the game, maybe not so much, because you're holding 5, so you're not getting back whatever you throw down. So you may want to start off small. Whether or not to go big early or trickle it out. Let's say you have a couple of Virginia cards. Do you want to just slap them down right at the beginning and make it harder for someone to override your vote? Or do you want to play a different state and figure if somebody just puts 1 Virginia, you could jump in and change it? What if they put it on the side you want it? Then 2 of your cards are unplayable. So there's a lot of different, choices to make here, which I think leads it to be a fairly interesting game over probably several playings. I probably won't be doing several playings of it just because of the nature. First of all, it only holds 3 to 5 players. Here's one thing I was thinking about. So I started thinking about how the 2-player game might work. There is no rules for 2 players. And my immediate thought was, there won't be enough blocks for each player at the beginning of the game. I mean, you only have 3, you won't be able to get things passed. In the 5-player game, that's no problem. In the 3-player game even, I could see where 3 blocks isn't enough to move issues. And in fact, you're going to have to play your, everybody is. Your guy with a quill, your main dude, in order to just get that fourth block so that you can push things through. In 2 players, I think I'd give a free block or 2 to each player, and I think it would probably work out okay. Anyway, that's just a thought there. Overall, I think it's a solid game. I'm not sure where I'm gonna, put a rating on it from Solitaire alone on this one. I feel like this is a game that I do want to investigate a lot more, see how it works out, but I think in terms of just the fun value and the thoughts involved and the randomness of the cards in there with them. Again, though, one thing I wanted to mention that I saw early on, I talked about the cards and said they're good when I looked at the components, but there's one problem with them, which is, let's jump around, confuse people a lot, right? That's sort of my specialty. So the backs of the cards tell you who and what something is, which is useful when it's face down on the table to decide which one to draw from. But this is open knowledge. So other players have to make this knowledge available to you somehow by setting their cards out so you can see them. You probably are. So here's what I'm seeing is that there might be a decent amount of delay of game in an opposed game or in a solitaire game if, I was really paying a lot of attention. But I know in an opposed game, I'd be more likely to start saying, okay, I have to know what everybody's got so I can make my decisions. I need to collect all that information. That information isn't easily visible, but it's open. So I would be looking at every single card that every person has. Do you have a New York? Does anybody have a New York? Does anybody? But I don't want to reveal that, so I'm going to tell everybody to spread them out, and I'll be looking, and my eyesight's not so good. So that's going to be kind of an issue with this, is those cards aren't terribly distinguishable by the backs. The backs are different, but I almost wish they had a brighter coloring or indication of which state they were, an easier way to see it. I don't know how much that's going to slow things down. I think with a group that didn't really try too hard to pay attention to their victory chances and using all that knowledge, and if I was, buzzed, I would be well into that kind of attitude, or if everybody else was. But if I felt like everybody was competitive in this game, I would feel like I had to know every single thing, and I know that would cost me some time. And knowing those things, even if it is visible, wouldn't be as big an expense, but it's going to cause an analysis paralysis issue where I've got too much information to assess. So that's kind of a minus there for me. I still enjoy it, and I think I'd like to play it opposed. Okay.